Welcome to Church Public, where we look at current events from a Christian perspective. Today, we talk about how we are encouraged to eat bugs, because apparently we're all living through some reality TV show like Survivor. In a related story, kind of, in the Netherlands, in Holland, in the land of the Dutch, cows have been emitting too much gas, so the farmers have to shut down their farms, apparently. But the farmers are not too happy about this. Coming back to America, in Arizona, we'll talk about legislation that has just passed to limit the voters who vote in elections to registered citizens of America. But apparently that is bad, so the United States Department of Justice is suing the state of Arizona to allow some of the 1.5 plus million illegal immigrants that have entered the southern border this year to vote in the presidential election of 2024. And finally, we have to talk about East Asia. East Asia Page, or Ellen Page, or Elliot Page. The name has changed so many times that I can't remember it anymore. At any rate, the actress or actor who was a woman and is now allegedly a man has somehow convinced Twitter and the mob to censor anyone who remembers anything about the past. I'm Matt Odegaard, and this is Church Public. Well, welcome to Church Public. I really appreciate you stopping by today. Your time is valuable, and I want to respect that. We'll get through these stories as soon as we can, but I think it's important for you to understand current events from a Christian perspective, because as I have surveyed the landscape, there are just not a lot of people doing that these days. There's a lot of conservative media that gives a conservative take, which can be or have a Christian focus, but often they won't say things outright. So I'm going to say scriptures outright. I'm going to say theological things outright. You may or may not even like that, but I'm just telling you from a Christian perspective, from what the Bible says, from our belief in who God really is. I'm just going to give you that perspective. Again, you can like it, not like it. You can turn this off, you can not, but that is the direction that we're going to go here on this show, because I want you to be able to follow Jesus and exist in this public square. As soon as you walk out that front door, you're outside, and you're going to come in contact with people who may disagree with you. How do you respond to that? How are you going to react to that? That's what I'd like to help you with. So if you haven't already, like this podcast, give a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want, share it. Share it with a friend who you think needs to hear more about what it means to live as a Christian in this wild and crazy world. All right. So today, some of these stories I don't even want to talk about, but I was just looking to find some stories, and this one came across my feed in several different places, and so unfortunately we have to talk about this. Here we have, what do I say, a sexy celebrity who isn't going to entice you that eating bugs is the future. No. Put down that perfectly seasoned steak and that juicy, grilled, delicious chicken. I'm getting really hungry right now, and I mentioned before, I'm sometimes always hungry, but no. You can't eat the steak, you can't eat the chicken, you must eat the bugs, and you will love it.
Meal of bugs. I am here to reveal my hidden talent, eating micro livestock, cornworms. They're still alive. Extraordinary. Very moist. Chewy. Can't quite describe the flavor, but need a little water. Let's try the second course, shall we? Just a little side note. 2 billion people in the world eat bugs, and I'm one of them. Because here we go. Have some mealworms. I'm telling you, I'd win Survivor. That is a fruity taste. I'd recommend it. Here we have. Oh.
Okay, that's all I can handle of this. But here, I know you're gonna say, well, that's just some wacky celebrity, and yeah, probably true, who just likes to eat bugs for some reason. Yeah, you would think that, but what you have to understand is there's more going on, and marketing. Everything is marketing. You have to understand this. All of Hollywood is marketing. Their whole persona is marketing. We talked about the whole Chris Rock and Will Smith thing. I mean, in some way, that whole thing was marketing. And I'm not going to rehash that. I don't really care. But Hollywood is marketing. Social media is marketing. There are social media, quote unquote, influencers who just make money doing things. This is what we're talking about. This is marketing. And why? Why is this marketing? I even saw another clip. I didn't pull it out and I won't show it, but James Corden had some other celebrities on his show and they had some quote unquote chef who made grasshopper skewers and other buggy things because they want you to eat bugs. And I know you're saying, no, you're a conspiracy theorist. No one wants you to eat bugs. So here's just one story, and I found a lot of them. Here's just one story. According to the World Economic Forum article titled Good Grub, Why We Might Be Eating Insects Soon. And I read through this whole article. I'm not going to quote the whole thing. You can go and look it up. It's on the interwebs. It's out there. The answer is simple: climate change. They say, according to this article, here's one part that I pulled out. Per kilo, because in Europe they do kilos. I know, I'm sorry, Americans, but kilo. Some of you Canadians get it. You're welcome. Per kilo of live weight, bugs emit less harmful gas than more mainstream farm animals. A cow, for example, produces 2.8 kilograms. I know we're still in kilograms. 2.8 kilograms of greenhouse gas per kilo of live body weight. Insects, on the other hand, produce just 2 grams. Good for them. They continue on. As scarcity of resources and sustainability become increasingly important issues for food production and distribution, how long before you're asking for insects in your food rather than complaining if you find one? This is the goal. They want you to eat bugs. This is Great Reset stuff. It's World Economic Forum stuff. Like literally, it's on their page. I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of the whole thing right now. I may do an episode on that later, but it was too weird and too creepy. I mean, the laugh in there, that was creepy, wasn't it? And if you didn't watch it and you were just listening, I don't think you get the full effect. So if you want, go to churchpublic.com and watch this video, and especially that video, because it's just weird and creepy. Somebody really enjoying eating bugs. It's one thing to watch it on Survivor where I'm going to win $1 million if I eat this bug. I may even be enticed to do that. For $1 million, I'd probably eat a cricket. Fine. That sounds like a good exchange. Just to do it because steaks are killing the planet, I have more trouble with that. I really enjoy steak. I really enjoy chicken. I really enjoy all kinds of meat. And other people do too. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But speaking of forcing you to eat bugs, what if, here's a question for you. What if they told the farmers the cows are, as I mentioned in the intro, passing gas too much? So you have to shut down your farm. I know, you're sitting there again saying, that sounds crazy. The people don't do that. Well, in the Netherlands, I almost said Neverlands, that's like Peter Pan, but no, the Netherlands is an actual place, Holland. You know, the windmills, the shoes, the clickety-clack shoes, right? They're in this place, there are farmers that have been told they have to reduce their farms or shut down their farms because their cows, their animals, their chickens, their pigs are giving off too much gas and they're killing the planet by providing food for the humans who live on the planet. No, I'm not making this up. This is a real thing. If you are worried about what the government might do if we had no way to defend ourselves and they wanted to control the production of food, say to promote climate change agenda, this is what's happening to Dutch farmers right now. Kian Beshta, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, probably not, I don't speak Dutch, reports for the Counter Signal. He explains what this protest is all about. Here is just one of his tweets. He says Dutch farmers are really angry after politicians' decision to close dozens of farms and cattle ranches to reduce nitrogen and other gases, as we'll see in a moment, by 30%. So Beshta says, quote, the Netherlands government has passed a policy that has been suggested and pushed by Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, as we just heard from. It's a policy that will see nitrogen pollution cut in half by 2030. Now, along with cutting nitrogen pollution comes cutting farms, cutting farm production, and cutting farm jobs. Farm livestock, according to the World Economic Forum, emits ammonia and methane in their urine and feces, aka animals create these things that apparently are bad for the environment. The Netherlands government has called on farmers to use animal feed that contains less protein as a way of reducing these emissions. Netherlands is known for its intensive farming in small areas of land where the government says compounds the problem. Now, as a side note, you may or may not have known that America is the biggest farming producer in the world. No surprise there. Second biggest, guess who? Netherlands. Yeah, they are. Small country, but they know how to farm. Again, the windmills. They've been farming for years and years and years and years and years, decades, hundreds of years doing this farming. They're good at farming. They're farmers. They produce way more than they can consume. So what do? They sell it. And what does that become? A huge part of their gross domestic product, that they sell a bunch of their stuff to other places. They're the number 2 producer. Now, maybe not in volume. China produces more rice than anywhere on the earth, but most of the giant population of China consumes that rice. There are other countries that are similar to that. Russia, for instance. But the Netherlands produces more than they need, and they sell it, and that helps their economy. It helps everybody. Farmers who have now been told they have to get rid of their livestock, shut down their farm, say they're being unfairly targeted as polluters, while other industries such as aviation, construction, transportation, etc., are contributing to emissions, of course, and the rules are far less intrusive, allowing them to remain in operation. According to this article, farmers say their government is not giving them any future amid the proposed reform. The Dutch government is said to be planning a multi-billion-dollar buyout of the farmers, but Christian van der Wal, Minister of Nature and Nitrogen Policy, has left open the possibility that government will expropriate land from farmers who do not comply. So did you hear that? The farmers who don't shut down their farms will lose their farms from the government because their cows are passing gas too much. This is where we are. Farmers are responding now, this is what we get to, with thousands of tractors blocking highways, driving down the roads. There are tons of videos going around. There are a lot of things going on. I didn't even get a chance because it just kind of happened as I was getting ready for this, but apparently they got a hold of a tank. They have been shot at by the police at this point. The police are shooting at farmers who don't want to give up their farms, bringing back a little bit of remembrance from what happened through Canada and the trucker protest, but obviously a little bit more intense at this point. And this is becoming a big problem, but it also should make us think about, well, what is the point of all this? Why are they removing the food production? And so farmers are responding with these tractors blocking highways, but they're also marching and protesting and not delivering food to stores because, well, we all eat food and it all comes from somewhere, namely farms. So I guess we'll just end with a note to the government that if you want to shut down the farmers, but you want to actually keep eating, maybe you shouldn't shut down the farms. And it reminds me of a C.S. Lewis quote that I think is really apropos and good for this moment that says, "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent, moral busybodies." In other words, a tyranny by somebody who says this is good for you may be the worst. And I'll give one final note from the Bible because that's what we do here. Genesis says, "Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, and I gave you green plants, I give you everything." That comes out of Genesis. And of course, Romans 14, which talks about eating food and what food you can eat and what food you can't eat because we have freedom in Christ. You can go ahead and read it. I'm going to summarize it super quickly here and say, and feel free to check my work. Go read Romans 14 for yourself. It's a great chapter. It says you can eat meat. You can eat whatever you want. And don't judge those that eat differently. In fact, I don't care if you eat bugs. I think it's gross. That's up to you. It doesn't matter to me. But you don't get to tell me that I have to eat bugs. I, for one, am going to stick with my nice, juicy steak. And I guess we'll just say, are we living in the Matrix now or what? Anyway, let's come back to America because that was a weird and interesting joint. Okay, so we're coming back to America and we're coming to Arizona. Arizona, lovely state in the South. At the same time, let's say that approximately 1.5 million illegal immigrants have come across the border this year. Arizona has passed legislation that says those illegal immigrants can't vote, because they don't belong to America. They don't care about America. They haven't decided they want to be an American. And having relatives in my family who went through the immigration process legally and can vote, I would say that makes a lot of sense. If you want to be part of America, become a citizen. It's actually not that hard. I literally have watched family members go through this process. But if you come in illegally and then want to vote for the President of the United States, that seems like you don't really have skin in the game. This should be common sense. It should be rational. It should be easy. But according to the United States Department of Justice and Biden's administration, it isn't. So the DOJ is suing the state of Arizona to allow apparently all these millions of illegal immigrants to vote in the presidential election. the most free and fair election that hasn't happened yet. Anyway, so the DOJ has issued this suit against the state of Arizona. According to USA Today, new law passed by the legislature and signed by Governor Ducey earlier this year requires specific documents to prove citizenship. Again, seems pretty straightforward. However, the article continues. In a complaint filed in the U.S. District Court, the Justice Department said House Bill 2492, quote, turns back the clock, unquote, on voting rights by imposing what it calls unnecessary requirements to produce documents proving citizenship. In its complaint, DOJ said the law violates the National Voting Rights Act, which established a voter registration form that requires people to attest they are U.S. citizens. That process was upheld, apparently, by the Supreme Court in the 2013 Arizona case. They go on to say the law violates the Civil Rights Act because it requires election administrators to reject registration forms based on errors and omissions that have nothing to do with establishing a voter's ability to cast a ballot, the DOJ alleges. You may remember just a couple of weeks ago when New York Supreme Court struck down a law that would have allowed around 800,000 illegal immigrants to vote in New York. And finally, just as a note, according to U.S. federal law, you actually are required to be a U.S. citizen to vote in national elections. Go check it out. Don't believe me. To vote in a national election for a president, for instance, you have to be a U.S. citizen. That's just a requirement. But apparently, according to the U.S. Department of Justice, that's no longer true. This is the part that we're in. We're in crazy town where people don't read the laws, know the laws, or enforce the laws. All right, finally coming back to reality, or rather leaving it entirely, we're going to East Asia. If you're familiar with the book 1984, which is a great read from George Orwell that will remind you that life is stranger than fiction, or sometimes exactly like fiction. Ellen Page from that little movie Juno, you know, Juno, where a teen girl gets pregnant and then chooses to have the baby. Well, now, like Voldemort, who shall not be named, this person has decided she wants to be a he and went through a bunch of surgeries to make the little girl look like a boy, and now her name is his name, his name, and has always been Elliot. If you're confused as much as I'm confused, that's because this is a rather confusing situation. So now we're supposed to forget about the entire past. All of the things that have happened before. All of the movies that this actress was in, because she is not Ellen. Ellen actually never existed. It has always been Elliot. Elliot is the only thing that has ever existed. Even in the movie Inception, where she was the love interest of Joseph Gordon-Levitt. She was actually a man. So when they kissed in the movie Inception, I guess it was actually a homosexual relationship, even though nobody knew that at the time, but that's really what it was. And when she had a baby on screen in Juno, she was also a man, playing a woman, having a baby, as men do, that is, have babies, because apparently everybody has babies. If this all seems strange, that's because it is. The sky is red, the ocean too, dogs are cats, and so are you. Or something like that. Yeah, I just made that up, but apparently that's the world we live in. You can make up whatever you want. Anything you want to say about reality is not real because words don't matter, and reality doesn't matter, and truth doesn't matter, or at least that's what they're forcing you to say. So, all of this comes to a head on Twitter, the clearinghouse of ideas, the digital public square, as Elon Musk has talked about correctly, where it is. This is what you're not allowed to talk about anymore. And who knows if I will even be allowed to post this. I have no idea. If you don't find it on YouTube, you may find it on Rumble. It may be disintegrated from the whole universe. I have no idea what's going to happen at this point, but I have to say the truth. True things are true things, and we have to say them, which we'll talk about. So on Twitter, Jordan Peterson was suspended for acknowledging the fact that until 5 minutes ago, Elliot was Ellen. So that is this first tweet here where he was suspended. He said, remember when pride was a sin and Ellen Page just had her breast removed by a criminal physician. He was removed for that because that is apparently hate speech. And this thing called dead naming. Dead naming is where you say the name of the person that doesn't want to have that name anymore that exists in the past, because nothing exists in the past. All that exists is the present. This is where we are. Nothing previously exists. Then, just to go down the waterfall, Dave Rubin was also suspended for posting a screenshot of the tweet that Peterson had that said, the insanity continues. Jordan Peterson has been suspended for this tweet about Ellen Page. He told me he will never delete the tweet paging Elon Musk. Yes, please. But this is where we just are literally in crazy town. And who knows how many countless others have also been suspended. We have no idea. The takeaway here is that Twitter and truth don't matter. And they are enforcing that standard once they decide on the current truth. The old truth doesn't and has never existed. If this sounds eerily familiar to a certain novel that I just referenced, 1984, that's because it is. In George Orwell's 1984, the book begins with the assertion that they have always been at war with Eurasia. If you don't know anything about the book, that's okay. You should read it. I think it's worth it because this is decades ago, almost, we're getting close to like 80, 90 years ago, noticed that if you follow lies to their end, really bad things happen in society. He saw this in various places around the world and wrote about it in this dystopian novel. At the beginning of the novel, they're talking about the war that they're in. The Ministry of Truth, yes, that's what it's called in the book, says that they were always at war with Eurasia. Only the problem is, later in the book, once it's realized that truth is relative and history is whatever the party says it is, the facts are changed. It says, quote, the past was alterable. The past never had been altered. Those are two diametrically opposed statements, but in this book and in some of our reality, apparently, it doesn't matter what truth is. The quote continues, Oceania was at war with East Asia. Oceania has always been at war with East Asia. If you remember, 5 seconds ago, I said at the beginning of the book, Oceania has always been at war with Eurasia. Those are two different places, but in the book, it doesn't matter. Just as in reality and on Twitter, it doesn't matter. Anything that has happened in the past doesn't matter. It never existed. All that exists is in the present, and that's all that really matters. We're literally living in that reality, at least in a digital space, but that's the problem. It doesn't just exist in a digital space. As I mentioned, I may get canceled for this. I may not get jobs because of this, because you're not allowed to say things that are not approved by the quote-unquote party, or Twitter, or the mob, or whoever is in charge of this whole thing. So, as we're winding down for the day, I want to introduce another book to you that you may or may not be familiar with. This is perhaps a thicker book, but this is The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And every time I say that name, people look at me funny like I made up words, and it sounds like it, but this is just a great and chilling report of the horrors of Russian communism, written by a Russian who was in it. I mean, I'll read you 5 seconds of his biography here, 1918 to 2008. He served as a decorated captain in the Soviet army during World War II, but in 1945, he was sentenced to prison for 8 years for criticizing Stalin and the Soviet government in private letters. Private letters. He didn't write a letter to Stalin and say, hey, maybe you shouldn't do this. He wrote letters to other people, which were found and discovered, and he went to prison for it. I'll just keep reading on. He's the author of a couple of novels, and he won the Nobel Prize in 1970. That's all I'll read from that for right now. Here's the point, and you should read this book. If you haven't read this book, it is interesting, terrifying. It's a little hard to get through. It is translated from Russian. There's a couple of good English translations out there, but you should read it if you can. It is a chilling report of the horrors of Russian communism, but at the center is this simple truth, which is actually a lie. That is the main lie. That your life is going great. Everything the party says is true, regardless of the truth. Don't believe your lying eyes. What is real is not real, and what I say is real is actually real. Again, if that's confusing, that's because it is. That's because this whole thing on Twitter in 1984, in communist Russia, and apparently today everywhere, the lie is you have to say whatever I want you to say, regardless of what is actually true. If you question what they say, you disappear. This is what's literally happening on Twitter, and it's what happens to people in communist Russia. Now, fortunately, they haven't gotten around to putting people in gulags and locking them away until you literally disappear and never come back. But who knows? And I'm not being like a merchant of death, and I'm not trying to scare you because I'm not scared. And I'll tell you about that in a moment, because Jesus is still King and Lord of the whole universe, including where we are today. But we have to understand what is going on. The same thing is happening again in a different way. In this book, you note that if you, the dad, speak up at the dinner table, your kids at school will rat you out and you disappear. This happened literally millions of times across Russia. And if you disappear, you most likely never return. That's what happened in communist Russia, but people don't read books anymore. They don't know history anymore. They don't understand what happened in Russia. They don't understand what happened in Mao's China. They don't understand what happened with Pol Pot. They don't understand what happened in the French Revolution. Like, these things happen over and over and over again, and we're getting into this point where we're conditioned that if you tell me it's true, I'm just going to believe it's true. Love is love. Love your neighbor means just accept whatever you say is true. The bottom line is this. Twitter, the administration, and the left more broadly want you to not believe your lying eyes. Inflation is not happening. Your life is just great. Gas prices have always been $10, right? Bugs are delicious. Everyone eats them. Why aren't you eating them? We should all eat them. Men are women, and women are men. And many, many other things that just aren't real, aren't based in reality, much less scripture. I mean, we can talk about scripture and we can talk about being true, and we'll talk about scripture in a moment, but just reality. Your lion eyes, what you see in the world, apparently those things don't matter and they're not true. Or, perhaps, and follow me here as we land this plane, truth is just truth. 2 + 2 does equal 4. A man is a man, a woman is a woman. The sky is really blue and the ocean is too. Maybe those things are actually real, and maybe we should stand for them. Maybe we should believe that true things are true things, and we should do true things, and say true things, and not lie. So we turn back to that old standard, the 9th commandment, do not lie. Exodus 20. Go and look it up. It's kind of an important one, and it kind of makes a difference. Why? Because lying is not loving. Let's go to the verse of the day, because this is an important one, and we need to just get to this one. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. That's Jesus in John 14:6. This is a really important verse. And why is this an important verse? Because truth really does matter. Lying to people is not loving. Encouraging delusion is not loving. We need to understand this. We need to live this. And we need to live this in the day-to-day, in the little things. This community, the online community, the technocracy, the culture at large will tell you you have to get in line or we'll lock you away or we'll banish you from Twitter or we'll kick you off of the public square, or worse, we will kick you out of your job or we'll kick you out of school. But truth is truth, and truth is going to come with a cost. That's what we have to understand. As we follow after God, truth is going to come at a cost, because if you live by lies, you cannot handle, you cannot stand, you cannot abide, you cannot have any truth in there. The problem is, truth will win out in the end. And that's why I'm not worried and I'm not scared. And you shouldn't be scared either. You just have to understand the real context. You have to understand the prospect that when you start saying true things, people are not going to like you and there will be repercussions for that. But following Jesus is more valuable. And we have to think longer term than this past 5 minutes or the next 5 minutes. We have to think we are eternal beings. We are spiritual beings. We are meant to live not just for this world, but for the beyond, and we have to start doing that now. Jesus is the way, he is the truth, and he is the life. No one comes to God but through him. So we have to follow after Jesus if we believe that God is real. If you don't, live however you want and see what happens in the end. I wouldn't recommend that, and I would encourage you to open a Bible, open it to John, read through John, and see if something hits you in your soul, in your spirit, and in your mind as you realize who God really is. That's my encouragement to you, and I hope that you find the way and choose to leave your life of lies and move towards the truth. But that's going to have to be your choice, and we're all going to have to make that choice, and we're all going to have to make the choice every day in the small things. Sure, the big things are going to matter too, and we have to make good choices in the big things, but lies start as little lies. It reminds me, I'm going to go back to this. There was a show called The Big Fib, where this character, Larry, fed the big fib, and it was a little lie, and it was just cute, and it was just this little lie, and all of a sudden it turned into this giant monster that literally started destroying the town. That is really how lies operate. Lies start really small, but then to cover up the little lie, you got to tell another lie. And to cover up that lie, you have to tell another lie until the lie gets so big that it literally takes over everything. That's the problem with lies. Lies break relationships. Lies create false worlds, and we cannot live in false worlds. We have to live in reality, because we do live in reality, and truth will win out in the end. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and I hope that you choose him and choose to follow him. For Church Public, I'm Matt Odegaard. Keep the faith.